So now that we understand synthesis in a lot more detail, we're going to be exploring Logic's most advanced synthesizer, and that is Alchemy. Now, in this masterclass, we're going to be creating a sound from scratch using Alchemy as a synth engine, but we're also going to be exploring how Alchemy can be used as a sampler. So to better understand how Alchemy works, we're going to be creating a sound from scratch, using all the things that we've learned in previous videos. So we'll be exploring the oscillators, the filters, its extensive modulation section, the amp envelope, and of course the effects. And so over the course of 6 videos, we'll be creating a sound before finally making a sampler engine out of Alchemy in our final video. Alchemy is certainly the biggest synthesizer built within Logic. Within it there are, I think, at the very least 300 odd presets to surf between. And these are kind of like pre-designated presets that you can filter out via category, subcategory, genre, timbre even. There's a search icon. You can even change the ratings and find your favorite sounds from the built-in sounds here as well. But we're going to go far beyond just preset surfing and really dive into how this thing works. Now, at the root of the Alchemy synthesizer is a subtractive synth, again meaning that it passes through filters to kind of change the tone of the synthesis sound, right? The synth under the hood though has far more kind of synth engines behind the scenes. We're not going to look into too many of them. We are going to kind of stay concentrated in the world of how to use Alchemy in the production sort of sphere, but there are many different types of synthesizer engines here, as you can see. We will be talking very briefly towards the end about how to use Alchemy as a sampler also. But for now, we're just going to sort of dive into the global features of Alchemy, how it's kind of built and how it works, before discussing each thing in a lot more detail. And we're gonna try and create a kind of a pluck or lead kind of sound, I think, this time, because over the last couple of videos we've concentrated on pads and basses. So we'll try and create something a little different using Alchemy as well. So let's break down first of all the basic interface. Now, at the top left hand side of Alchemy is the global tab, where you have the section for your sources. Now, sources is just another way of saying the oscillators, basically, right? They're the sound sources, so I'll describe them as sound sources from now on. But at the root of it, they're all different oscillators. Now, if I just select the pre-existing saw preset, okay, so this is the initialized preset with nothing going on in it, you can hover down to the load VA or load virtual analog here. We've got our basic sound sources here, the things that we kind of are used to seeing with most other synthesizers. Complex is the sort of digitized version of any sound source, okay? And then you have specific sound sources for every traditional basic wave. Now, you can randomize the source, which is quite a cool feature. You can import your own audio, which is useful for when we talk about sampling in a future video's time. But fundamentally, at the root of it, the global sources tab is a way that we can initialize 4 sound sources simultaneously. Each sound source has its own specific controls with regards to volume, tuning, panning, and effect sends. We can also dive further into the sources by selecting the letters that correspond just underneath the global tab. So each sound source has its own unique setting here. So if I just engage all of these, okay, you'll notice that all 4 sound sources letters have turned on, and I can go in and edit a little further each time. We'll talk about this in a lot more detail when we talk about the sound sources tab. We then have a global 2 filter module here, where you can mix and match between 2 filters, again in parallel or in series mode, which is quite cool. You have again a sends tab here, the standard kind of responses for any filters. But for the first time, I think, away from any other synths we've looked at so far, built within the filter tab, okay, we've got the standard low pass, band pass, and high pass with different sounding features to them, I suppose. Okay, they're all kind of emulating different types of synthesizers. That's why they have those weird descriptive names next to them. But unlike any other synth we've spoken about, this synthesizer comes with a filter section that doesn't actually operate as a filter section. So like a bit crusher is a kind of deterioration for your audio. So it's not the traditional filter in a way that a filter works. You know, tube distortion, downsampling, even a compressor. So that's something we can experiment with when we talk about the filter stage. Okay, and again, that is the global filter, okay, where we've got two global filters. The modulation panel is quite huge because effectively it takes up almost half of Alchemy's screen. Technically, from this panel, I would say, including this performance tab here, that can all be described as modulation. This performance tab and all of these numbers associated with that is effectively the macros. Okay, so again, that is something that we spoke about in an earlier video. This is where we can fundamentally assign multiple movements within the synthesizer to a single knob, or multiple sound sets to certain numbers as well. The LFO AHDSR now, and for the first time, the traditional ADSR settings are a little different, because rather than just having attack, decay, sustain, release, we have a hold feature which holds us at the maximum attack level. Okay, as you can see from what I'm doing here. Okay, so that's the global AHDSR now. Okay, and that is hardwired, if you like, to modulate the master volume. You can see that if you were to select anything, that becomes available as your modulation matrix. We'll talk about that a bit more later on as well. Then the different sources of modulation are shown in all of these tabs. Every single one of these is a modulation source. We'll talk about that in far more detail later as well. And we've also got the effects panel down here, where Alchemy comes preloaded with a whole load of pre-existing effects for us to choose from. So we'll take each thing as it comes, and we're going to start by talking about the sources.